Spring is in the air here in New Hampshire. Today we're going to take you through the farm and show you what's coming up. The other night I came outside at about 10 p.m. and I heard a chorus that I haven't heard in a long time, it felt like. Anybody who lives up in the Northeast knows that one of the first signs of spring is you hear the peepers in the bigger ponds, but then in the vernal pools of the forest, you hear the wood frogs. I'll cut in a little clip right here if you've never heard them before. The awesome thing about wood frogs is that you only really hear them once spring has truly set in. They have this bizarre innate knowledge of what's going to happen for the rest of spring, and you know, if we're going to get a ton of snow, you won't hear the wood frogs. So hearing those frogs start chirping is pretty awesome because it means that spring's here and we can finally start planting stuff.
What's up, cool kid?
It is a beautiful Wednesday afternoon here on our homestead, and we figured it might be a good time to walk around and give you an update of what's happening around the homestead.
So right now we're in a little bit of an in-between season in spring, which is a little bit crazy because spring is usually just a busy time. So we just wanted to give everyone a little bit of an update on what's happening.
So this is one of our pollinator gardens, but this one we call the Joni garden after Jack's mom because most of the plants in it are from her. When we moved here, all of these daffodils that you see were already planted here, and they certainly need to be divided. We also have a bunch of cone plants in here, a couple of creeping phlox, some various sedums as well, and a whole bunch of orange tiger lily that pretty much take over here, but I kind of like it because there's a lot of greenery. So we've noticed that there's something only in this particular garden here that seems to be eating our lilies. We have no idea what it is. I've got lilies down on the left-hand side of me, and I have a bunch of lilies up by the house, and also there's a bunch of wild ones over on the...
Chop down.
You're okay.
Oh no! You did that one good, kid. We're off.
Back at it.
If you happen to know what might be eating the lilies, make sure you comment below.
So we've got 2 peach trees planted down here as well. One's right behind me and then one is a little bit over that way. Both of these got annihilated pretty hard by deer last year. So after they got hit pretty hard, I put cages up around them and they were able to grow enough leaves where I'm pretty sure they were going to do okay. And they did come back for this spring, which is awesome. They're starting to bud out right now, which is pretty cool. And I'd imagine probably in the next few weeks, they'll have a bunch of flowers on them. We also had some surplus strawberry plants last year that we just kind of stuck down here, and looks like they're doing pretty good. So behind me you can see a stand of relatively young trees. In the next month or so, I'm going to be going through and taking out as many of those as I can. The plan there is that I have a bunch of bare root Chinese chestnut trees that I want to plant. The reason we're putting them in is actually going to be twofold. One, we like to eating chestnuts, so they're going to be a great food source for us. The second reason is that chestnuts are also a great food source for pigs, which we raise. If I tried to plant the chestnut trees in the forest paddock where we raise the pigs, they would decimate those things pretty quickly. They dig them right up and eat them. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to plant our chestnut trees down here, let them get established, and eventually in the future we may graze our pigs down here under the chestnut trees. But for now, what we'll do is in the fall, we'll collect those fruits and bring them to the back and feed them to the pigs that way. If we go far enough down the timeline, the eventual plan is to clear out a whole bunch of land along the right-hand side of the driveway that you can see and essentially put our orchard in there. Pretty much any fruit or nuts that we enjoy eating, we'd like to have over there. Nut trees are a little bit tricky because we're in zone 5A and there's not a ton of nuts that grow well up here, but fruit trees are a no-brainer for us. And eventually we'd like to have a whole bunch of fruit trees there that can provide for us. No, you guys want to go in?
Yeah, it's chilly for our little hands are getting purple.
Okay. Jackie and Emma are going to go inside. It's starting to get cold, so I'll take you out back and show you the garden. So what's going on in the garden? If you remember a couple weeks back, we took a chance on a very early planting. We direct sowed a bunch of seeds into this first bed and then that 4 foot by 4 foot bed that you see over there. This bed we did broccoli rabe, spinach, kale, cauliflower, and escarole. And then in that back bed, we did 2 varieties of radishes and also ended up planting some garlic. We did a spring plant on the garlic just to see what would happen. See that in the center of the screen? That is garlic coming up right next to a radish. So the story behind that is we had planted the garlic very early. I had totally forgotten where I planted the garlic. So when we came back through and we knew we wanted to put some radishes in this bed, I just guessed randomly where the garlic had been planted, and unfortunately we ended up planting the radish seeds right on top of the garlic. So what I'm hoping for is that the radishes are going to grow quick enough where they'll be done in a couple weeks and we can just pull them off from on top of the garlic, and the garlic will need to go until a little bit later in summer. You know, at the end of the day, it's not the end of the world. We're just going to see what happens and roll with it. So overall, we're pretty pleasantly surprised to see how these direct sowings did. We sowed them way early, probably a month earlier than we should have, but we knew we had some warm weather coming up. It had been a relatively warm spring so far overall, with the exception of the fact that it snowed on these seeds like the day after we planted them. But we knew that if we took a chance and got some food in the ground, we would have a much earlier harvest. So definitely take a chance sometimes. You know, if you put seeds in the ground and they don't come up, the only thing you've lost is probably a couple dollars worth of seeds, whereas we put this stuff in the ground and now we're actually going to have food possibly before what our normal last frost would be, which is awesome. New chicks are doing well. We've had no issues with them so far. One thing I did see that's a little disturbing though. So this is one of the ISA brown chicks, and as you can see, the tip of her beak is blunted. Let's put her back. Commercial breeds like ISA browns and red stars and red comets, it's pretty common for hatcheries to take the beaks of those breeds and clip them or trim them, or whatever phrase you want to use. And the reason they do that is so that the chickens can't peck at one another in commercial settings where you have lots of chickens in a big hen house. You know, if you don't want hens picking at each other and causing damage to each other, they'll trim their beaks essentially so their beaks are blunted and they can't do damage, which people have their own personal opinions of both ways. Some people don't mind it, some people do. Personally for us, we choose not to have chickens with trimmed beaks on our property. And the main reason why is that we let our birds out, we let them forage, we let them scratch around. If you have a chicken with a dull beak, it's not going to be able to do that, or it impedes the ability for it to do that. It can still eat a pelleted or a crumbled feed, no problem, but finding bugs and things like that, it's just not as good for the chicken to have a blunted beak, which is why we don't like it. I have to say I'm a little upset. We got the chickens at Tractor Supply. Not normally our first choice, but I was there, they had them for a good price, and I figured, what the heck, we'll get some. My main gripe with the whole thing is that nowhere did it say in the documentation on the chicks, or did anyone let me know, that the chicks had their beaks trimmed. And you might say, Jack, wouldn't you just look at the chickens that you bought? And the answer there is that you can't tell. They use an infrared light to burn essentially the tip of the chick's beak, and what ends up happening is it looks fine at a day old or a couple days after, but within about 2 weeks, that tip of the beak, it essentially turns black and falls off. And I've noticed all the other ISA browns that we bought are doing the same thing. So I'm not going to bring the chicks back to Tractor Supply or anything like that, but it is kind of a bummer that either the hatchery didn't tell Tractor Supply that the chicks had their beaks trimmed, or Tractor Supply didn't convey that to the customers buying that the chicks had their beaks trimmed. What we'll end up having to do is just keep an eye on those chickens as they get older. They're still going to lay just fine. They'll still be able to eat just fine because we do supplement with a standard layer feed, but we'll just have to keep an eye on them and make sure that their beaks aren't growing in an awkward angle, or there's no deformities that end up coming from it. It's not an exact science when they trim them, so it's just one more thing for us to worry about. So these are our seed starts. We've got cauliflower right here, some squash back there. Those are poblano peppers. And then these are all heirloom tomatoes right here. These are our pepper starts right here. And then in this tray and this tray, we have tomatoes and squash that are available as seedlings for sale later in May. So these are planted a little bit behind our own starts. And lastly, you can see over here, it's a top secret project, what we have going on in the incubator. I can't say who we're working with yet or what's inside, but when we're able to, I'm pretty excited for it, and I hope you guys will be too. So that's where we'll leave today's video at. As always, thank you for watching. Have a great day. Bye.